My sister tried to drug me by slipping something into my drink, so I quietly swapped glasses with her husband. Now she's living with the consequences, and I'm just watching it all unfold. Before we dive into this shocking tale of sibling betrayal and twisted consequences, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy real-life inspired stories filled with drama, deception, and poetic justice, this is where it all unfolds. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next jaw-dropping chapter. Now, let me tell you how one glass of wine revealed everything. I never expected that Sunday dinner to change everything. We'd always had our issues, me and my sister, but I figured we were past the childish rivalry stage. It was supposed to be a peaceful gathering, just family. My parents, my sister, and her husband, a couple of cousins. We were sitting around the long wooden dining table at our parents' house, the place where so many family meals had been shared. The room smelled of roasted chicken and garlic potatoes, and for a while, everything felt normal. But beneath the laughter and wine, I felt something off. A stare that lingered too long. A smile that didn't match the warmth in the room. And it was hers. My sister's. Rachel. She had always been the golden child, the one who wore success like perfume. Me? I was the quiet achiever, the one who stayed in the shadows and didn't make waves. But something shifted after Dad put me in charge of managing the estate's new expansion. That gave me a little more say in the family business, and apparently that didn't sit well with Rachel. I noticed the change in her almost immediately. The way she gripped her wine glass a little too tight. How she laughed just a bit too hard at my every comment. She was playing nice, but her eyes betrayed her. They didn't smile. They calculated. The drinks were flowing. Someone suggested a toast. I reached for my glass, the one placed just in front of me, the one I hadn't touched since I sat down. As I lifted it, something caught my eye. A shimmer, almost invisible unless the light hit it just right. I paused. Everyone else was mid-toast, clinking and sipping, but I held my glass back. I glanced sideways and saw her watching me, lips pressed together in a strange half-smile, eyes narrowed like she was holding her breath. That's when I knew. Something was wrong. This wasn't just sibling rivalry anymore. This was something darker. Something dangerous. I remembered what I'd seen on a podcast a week earlier. How someone had slipped something into a drink and almost got away with it. I thought it was just internet drama. Until that moment. Until I realized I might be living it. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm. Slowly, I leaned over as if I was trying to hear my brother-in-law better. David, her husband, who was talking about some real estate deal gone wrong. I laughed at his joke, then casually reached out and swapped our wine glasses. He didn't notice. Neither did she. She just watched me, waiting for me to take that sip. And I did, just not from the glass she had tampered with. David raised his glass too, mirroring my movement. To new beginnings, he said. We all echoed the sentiment. And then he took a deep sip. Rachel's eyes widened slightly, just for a second, and she quickly looked away. My stomach twisted. I didn't know what she had put in that drink, but it was no joke. I sat there silently, watching, waiting. I needed to know if my instincts were right, or if I had just accused my own sister in my mind without reason. But what happened next proved I wasn't imagining a thing, and it was only the beginning. David started coughing, just a little at first. A dry, scratchy sound that drew a few glances, but nothing serious. He waved it off with a chuckle and reached for his napkin. Sorry, he said hoarsely, must have gone down the wrong pipe. I nodded, trying not to let my own nerves show. But Rachel, she wasn't looking at him. She was still looking at me. Her smile had shifted into something forced, stretched too tightly across her face, like she was still hoping I'd drink from the glass. When I didn't, when I kept it untouched in my hand, her eyes flicked. Once, quickly, to David. That's when I saw it. A twitch in her jaw. Barely noticeable, but enough to confirm what I already suspected. I stared at her, just long enough to make her uncomfortable. Then I smiled. Slow, calm, deliberate. Her face faltered. She tried to look away, but I saw it all. Confusion, fear, maybe even a touch of regret. She hadn't planned for this. Whatever her motive had been, whatever twisted justification had played out in her head, it wasn't meant to hit her husband. And now, as he rubbed his chest and cleared his throat again, her panic began to seep through. Still, she said nothing. Just reached out, refilled his glass with a shaking hand, and kept pretending everything was normal. The kind of pretending that cracks the moment someone asks a real question. The evening dragged on in a haze. My mother brought out dessert, talking about her new garden project. My father rambled about rising taxes. I responded when spoken to, nodded and smiled, but my focus was locked on Rachel and David. He was looking pale now. Not sick, exactly, but there was a slow heaviness settling into his face. I caught him blinking harder, rubbing his temple. His speech had slowed. Rachel leaned into him, whispering something I couldn't hear. He nodded absent-mindedly. That's when I saw her hand slip beneath the table. Her phone. A message? A note to someone? I didn't know, but her fingers were trembling. I stood and excused myself, taking my glass with me as I walked toward the kitchen. I could feel her eyes following me. She thought I was going to pour it out. Maybe she hoped I would, but I didn't. I placed it carefully on the counter and stepped away, just far enough to let her believe she had a chance to do something. I waited. I listened. Sure enough, within minutes, I heard the shuffle of footsteps behind me. I turned slightly and caught her in the reflection of the kitchen window. Rachel stood frozen, eyes darting from the glass to me. Caught. Trapped. Silent. I didn't drink it, I said, my voice calm, quiet. But you knew that already, didn't you? Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She looked like she wanted to scream or cry or run. Instead, she whispered, "You don't understand." I turned to face her fully. Then make me understand. Right now. Before he gets worse. That's when it hit her. David. The very man she had sworn to love, to protect. Whatever she'd laced the drink with, she had just fed it to him instead. And for the first time in her life, she couldn't control the outcome. Her lips quivered. It was supposed to be a joke. A prank. Just a little sleep aid. But her voice betrayed her. It was shaking. Unstable. That wasn't guilt I heard. It was fear of getting caught. Fear of having it turned back on her. I stepped closer. You sure about that? I asked. Because you watched me the entire night. And now that he's the one feeling it, suddenly it's just a prank. She didn't respond. She just looked at the glass, then back toward the dining room where David sat, now slumped slightly in his chair. And I knew then, she wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry for who it hit. I picked up the glass, still untouched, and held it between us. You know what this is, I said. And now, so do I. Her eyes were wide, pleading, but I wasn't moved. Not anymore. You're going to clean up your own mess, I told her. Because if he ends up in a hospital tonight, or worse, I'll make sure every detail of this evening comes out. Every look, every lie, every sip. And with that, I walked past her and returned to the table, just in time to see David grip the edge of the table with both hands. His breathing was shallow. Rachel scrambled behind me. Her mask was gone. The evening was collapsing, and she had no idea what was coming next. The tension in the dining room was thick enough to choke on. David's fork clattered onto his plate as he leaned forward, both hands braced against the edge of the table, his face drained of color. A thin sheen of sweat had formed along his brow, and his breathing came shallow, uneven. I watched the room fall into a stunned hush. My parents paused mid-conversation. My cousins exchanged confused glances. Rachel stepped in behind me, wide-eyed and breathless, the carefully constructed facade she wore all night now fully shattered. I had to hold back the bitter satisfaction building inside me. She thought she'd be watching me fall apart. But now the mirror had turned, and all she could do was try to keep up with the lie unraveling around her. My mother rushed over to David's side. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice thick with concern. David nodded slowly, but his body told a different story. He looked like a man trying to convince himself he wasn't sinking. "Just lightheaded," he muttered. "Probably nothing. I've been skipping meals with all the work stress." But I knew better. Rachel knew better. And she looked like she was standing in a collapsing house, trying to convince everyone the walls weren't shaking. Her voice was small. "Maybe we should call someone, just to be safe." My father was already reaching for his phone, but I stepped forward and gently placed a hand on his arm. "Let's not jump just yet," I said. "David, why don't you come with me to the den, just to get some fresh air away from the kitchen and the noise?" He agreed with a weak nod. Rachel flinched. "I should go too," she said quickly. But I stopped her. "No, Rachel. Stay here. Mom might need help clearing up." I didn't wait for her response. David and I made our way to the den, just down the hall. The moment we were alone, I guided him to the leather recliner and offered him a glass of water. He looked at me, bleary-eyed. "What's going on?" he asked. "I feel weird, not sick, but not right either." This was the moment. The one that would decide what came next. I sat across from him, my voice low. David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to take me seriously, even if it sounds insane. He blinked slowly. Okay. I took a breath. The wine you drank tonight wasn't poured for you. It was poured for me, and I think something was in it. He didn't react at first, just stared. Then he laughed softly, more confused than amused. Wait, what? Are you saying someone tried to drug you? I nodded. I noticed something in my glass. I switched it with yours. I didn't know what it was, still don't. But now here we are. His eyes slowly widened as the truth sank in. You're saying Rachel? I didn't say it. I didn't have to. His expression darkened as he slumped back into the chair. Why the hell would she do that? He whispered. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I handed him the untouched glass, the one I had taken with me to the kitchen, the one Rachel had tried to intercept. If you want to know what's going on, I said, this is where it starts. I think she panicked because she realized you were the one who drank it. He stared at the glass like it held the key to some forgotten door in his marriage. Maybe it did. We sat in silence for a while. I let the weight of the moment settle in. Finally, he spoke again, quiet, almost to himself. She's been distant lately. Suspicious. I thought it was work stress or something. But this, his voice trailed off. She said it was just melatonin. I replied coldly, but no one sneaks that into a drink at a family dinner. He didn't respond. Just sat there, processing it all. I could see it in his eyes. The slow realization that the woman he loved might have been hiding more than just resentment. And that maybe this wasn't the first time she blurred the lines between jealousy and harm. Back in the kitchen, I knew Rachel would be trying to regroup, craft a new version of events. Maybe she'd claim she mixed up glasses by mistake. Maybe she'd say David had an allergic reaction to the chicken. Whatever story she'd land on, I'd already pulled the pin. And she had no idea how close everything was to detonation. I looked at David again. I'll give you space, I said. But if I were you, I'd ask her some real questions tonight. Ones she can't deflect. And if anything happens to you, if anything gets worse, I'll go to the police with that glass and the full story. He nodded, slowly, soberly. There was no fight left in him, just realization. I stood and left him there, staring into the untouched wine glass like it held every lie she'd ever told. When I walked back into the kitchen, Rachel was the first to look up. Her expression was taut, desperate for reassurance. How is he? She asked. Confused, I replied. But alive. For now. And then I walked past her, just close enough to whisper, you should have picked a different target. I didn't get 10 steps down the hallway before I heard it, the sound of something heavy crashing to the floor. Then came the collective gasps, chairs scraping back, my mother's panicked voice rising over everyone else's. I turned sharply and sprinted back into the dining room. David was on the floor, curled awkwardly near the base of the dining chair. His limbs twitched once, then fell still. My father knelt beside him, checking his pulse, his voice calm but shaking underneath. Rachel stood frozen behind them, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wild with disbelief or guilt. Maybe both. Everything unfolded fast. My cousin dialed emergency services while my mother barked instructions. I moved in slowly, kneeling on the other side of David. His pulse was faint, but still there. His lips had taken on a bluish tinge. I looked up and locked eyes with Rachel. Her face told a story no lie could cover. This wasn't shock. This was fear. Real, gut-wrenching fear. Not because her husband had collapsed, but because the poison, whatever it was, had worked. I could see her calculating. If he died, this was over for her. Her marriage. Her freedom. Her entire carefully manicured life. The paramedics arrived in under 10 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. They moved swiftly, stabilizing David and lifting him onto the stretcher. They asked the usual questions, what he had eaten, what he had been drinking, any known allergies. I waited until Rachel opened her mouth to speak and then interrupted. He drank from the wrong glass, I said plainly. All eyes turned to me. I think someone tampered with one of the wines. The glass he drank from wasn't poured for him. The room went still. My mother looked horrified. Rachel flinched. One of the paramedics took the remaining wine glasses, including the one I'd set aside earlier. We'll have these tested, he said quickly. Any idea what might have been added? Again, Rachel opened her mouth. Again, I cut her off. She might know, I said calmly. She was sitting next to it before dinner started. My voice wasn't angry. It was surgical. Controlled. Rachel's face drained of color, and she stumbled backward into the kitchen counter. You can't seriously think but the rest of her words collapsed into a sob. It wasn't a performance anymore. She was unraveling for real now. They wheeled David out, oxygen mask strapped to his face. I followed them to the door, gave them the address, and watched the ambulance disappear down the street with its lights spinning silently into the night. When I returned inside, Rachel was already in defense mode. She paced the kitchen like a caged animal, muttering half-explanations and broken thoughts to herself. My parents tried to make sense of it, but there were too many gaps in her story. Maybe he had food poisoning, she blurted. Or he's been stressed. That can cause blackouts, right? She looked around, desperate for validation. None came. I stepped back into the room and spoke clearly. You laced my glass with something. You thought I'd drink it, pass out, embarrass myself, or worse. You didn't expect I'd switch it. You didn't expect your own husband would end up being the one to suffer. Her hands flew up in protest. It wasn't poison, she shouted. It was just a sedative. A mild one. I just wanted you to. I don't know, relax. But her voice cracked on the last word. Because even she didn't believe what she was saying anymore. Rachel, my mother said slowly, voice breaking. What were you thinking? That question hung in the air like smoke. My sister stared at her, eyes wide and glossy. You always take his side, she muttered. Even now. She turned to me. You don't get it. You waltzed into the family business, into Dad's trust, into everything I've worked for my whole life. I thought maybe if you slipped up, if you got caught doing something embarrassing, then he'd see it. Finally, I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. But it was too late. The damage was done, and her words didn't sound like remorse. They sounded like justification. I folded my arms and stared at her. You tried to ruin me over a job title. She didn't answer, just turned her back to us and leaned against the counter like she could disappear. My father didn't say a word. He just walked out, silent and broken. My mother stood still, her eyes hollow. I turned and walked past Rachel. You need to get a lawyer, I said over my shoulder. Because when the toxicology report comes back, and it matches what you slipped into that glass, they're going to ask questions. And I'll be there to answer every single one. Her voice trembled behind me. Are you going to destroy me? I paused at the hallway. No, I said without looking back. You already did that yourself. The next morning, the silence in our family group chat spoke louder than any accusation. No good morning. No updates. No concern. Just quiet dread. I checked my phone every few minutes, waiting for news on David. Around 9:42 a.m., a message finally came through. This one from my mother. He's stable. They flushed his system. Doctors say it was a strong sedative. He could have gone into a coma. My chest tightened, not with guilt, but with the cold confirmation that everything I'd suspected was now fact. Rachel hadn't just made a mistake. She had taken deliberate action that nearly cost someone his life. I sat at my desk, staring at the message while the weight of it all bore down on me. For years, Rachel's petty rivalries had been disguised as playful teasing or just sibling stuff. But this was criminal. I knew I had to act, but part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this. My sister had crossed a line so violently that even her lies couldn't cover it anymore. I picked up the phone and dialed the detective the hospital had already involved due to the suspicious nature of David's sudden collapse. When he picked up, I gave him everything, my statement, the timeline, the untouched wine glass, and every single detail I'd observed that night. Later that day, Rachel showed up at my apartment. No warning, no text, just a knock. When I opened the door, she looked like someone on the verge of falling apart. Hair disheveled, dark circles beneath her eyes, lips quivering. Can we talk? She asked softly. I stepped aside but didn't say a word. She walked in and stood near the window, arms crossed, like she was trying to shield herself from her own reflection. They questioned me this morning, she said. They have the wine glass. They told me what was in it. Her voice cracked. If David hadn't gotten to the hospital when he did, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I leaned against the table, keeping my distance. Why did you come here? I asked. To explain or to beg? She turned to me slowly. I came because I'm scared. I made a mistake, yes, but I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was angry, jealous. I felt like you were taking everything that was supposed to be mine. Her voice rose slightly. I gave up everything to protect this family's image. I stayed loyal to a husband who barely noticed me, to a father who always looked at you like you were the better choice. I cut in, voice sharper than I intended. So your answer was to drug me at a family dinner? To knock me out and let people think I was some kind of unstable embarrassment? That's not just jealousy, Rachel. That's attempted poisoning. You could have killed David. Her eyes welled with tears, but I didn't move. I didn't comfort her. Not this time. I never planned to hurt anyone, she whispered. I thought if you just slipped up publicly, maybe Dad would question giving you so much responsibility. I didn't know David would be the one to drink it. I stared at her for a long moment. But you watched him drink it. You didn't stop him. You didn't even flinch. You waited for me to fall, and when it didn't happen, you hoped no one would notice. She crumbled into a chair, covering her face with her hands. I was in too deep, she sobbed. I didn't know how to stop it. I stayed quiet. Let her cry. Let her unravel. She needed to feel it, to live in it. There was no saving face anymore. Only truth. Eventually, she looked up at me. Will you testify? She asked, her voice barely audible. If this goes to court, I didn't hesitate. Yes. Her eyes widened in pain, like she'd been slapped. You're really going to do that to me? She whispered. You did this to yourself, I replied coldly. You want to walk away from it like it was a mistake. But mistakes don't come in capsules and dissolve in wine glasses. You made a choice. And choices have consequences. She stood slowly and walked to the door, turning once before leaving. You've always been the stronger one, she said. Maybe that's why I hated you. I didn't reply. Just watched her step out into the hallway, shoulders slumped, as if the weight of what she'd done had finally started to settle on her bones. The truth was out now. Her perfect image had cracked, and this time, no amount of charm or crocodile tears could fix it. I sat quietly at the back of the courtroom, the fluorescent lights above flickering faintly, casting long shadows across the polished wood floor. Rachel stood at the front, flanked by her lawyer, dressed in muted colors, her hair tied back tightly like she thought neatness could erase intent. The judge read the charges: unlawful administration of a substance, endangerment, and attempted assault. Each word echoed like a gavel strike against her name. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I just watched, like she had watched me that night. But unlike her, I wasn't waiting for someone to fall. She already had. The courtroom was half filled. Family members, a few reporters, and David, seated quietly with his own attorney. His presence said everything. He hadn't come to support her. He'd come to bear witness. The toxicology report had confirmed what we suspected: a high dose of zolpidem mixed into the wine, enough to induce blackouts, confusion, and dangerously low heart rate. The prosecution made it clear it wasn't a mistake. It was premeditated. And while Rachel's defense team tried to spin it as an emotional lapse, one born of stress and jealousy, the truth stood firm in every line of the report, every witness statement, including mine. When I was called to the stand, I took a breath and remembered everything. The shimmer in the glass, the twitch in her smile, the way her eyes followed me, not with concern, but calculation. I told the court how I switched the glasses, how David drank what was meant for me, how Rachel had stared, speechless, when the reality of her plan's backfire hit her like a wave. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. The facts were heavy enough on their own. When I finished, I looked at her for the first time. Her eyes met mine, red-rimmed, hollow, and for a split second, I thought she might mouth an apology. But nothing came. David's testimony followed. His voice was subdued, but steady. He spoke not only of the collapse and the hospital stay, but of the deep betrayal. It wasn't just what was in the glass, he said. It was who put it there and why. I shared a bed with her. I trusted her. I never expected I'd become collateral damage in some twisted attempt at sibling revenge. That line landed harder than anything I'd said. Even the jury flinched. Rachel lowered her gaze and didn't look up again for the rest of the trial. The sentencing came quicker than expected. The judge, while acknowledging her lack of prior criminal record, emphasized the severity of her actions and the intent behind them. Rachel was given a suspended sentence, community service, mandatory counseling, and a public apology to both David and me. It wasn't prison, but it was exposure. It was legal branding, and it stripped her of the polished mask she'd worn for years. The headlines were brutal. Era's sister drugging scandal splashed across local outlets. She resigned from her company's board within a week. Her reputation was reduced to whispers and internet jokes. Our parents were devastated. My mother wept quietly through most of the proceedings. My father never spoke to the media, but his eyes told the story. Disappointment, so deep it carved new lines into his face. He didn't attend the post-trial conference. Neither did I. There was nothing left to say. I went home that day with no celebration, no vindication, just silence. And for once, that silence didn't hurt. It felt earned. Weeks passed. I heard Rachel had moved to a smaller apartment in the city. She cut ties with old friends, shut down her social media, and tried to restart in a world that had already moved on without her. David filed for divorce 2 months later. Irreconcilable differences, the report said, but we both knew what those differences truly were. I didn't reach out. I didn't need to. Letting go was part of healing. And I was finally at peace with letting her fall. People ask if I regret it, testifying, exposing her. But how could I? She handed me the truth and dared me to keep quiet. And for once in my life, I didn't. I told the world what she tried to do. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but for clarity. To stop pretending that family means protection no matter what. Because sometimes, the most dangerous betrayals were familiar faces. And sometimes, survival looks like setting fire to the lies before they swallow you whole. You've heard the story of how silence shattered, how a single glass held the power to expose a lifetime of hidden resentment. If this journey gripped you, and you want more stories that peel back the layers of family, trust, and survival, then hit that subscribe button now. New stories drop every day, and everyone has a truth waiting to be told. Don't just listen. Be part of the burn.